Anonymous operations aim to bring voice to the oppressed and justice to those who suffered oppression from fascist and authoritarian regimes. All operations are done with logical and social basis, and the bases are investigations, analyses and preparations for each target.
The conflict between Israel and Palestine happened since the 1940s and rebuilt the emergence of the Zionist movement, who defended the foundation of a Jewish state in Palestine. Throughout the 21st century, a series of conflicts like the Six-Day War have been fought. Currently the Palestinians are obliged to live in very bad conditions. Both sides claim their own space of sovereignty, although at the moment that right is fully exercised only by the Israelis. Therewith, wars are accomplished, groups considered terrorists rise, lives are lost and a lasting peace gets further away. We can say that all this started with the rise of Zionist movement at the end of the 20th century. In this period a lot of Jews started to migrate, in large scale, towards the territories of Palestine then inhabited by about 500,000 Arabs. That region was claimed by the Jews for having been theirs until their expulsion by the Roman Empire in 3th century BC, starting the Jewish diaspora, the dispersion of Jews around the world. The Zionist movement consolidated by the Hungarian journalist Theodor Herzl. He defended the right of Jews to return to Palestine and form a Jewish national state there. This movement emerged as an answer from the Jewish community in Europe to the growing anti-Semitism of this continent. The foundation of Israel started the conflicts between Arabics and Israelis in the region. Over the 20th century happened, the First Arabic-Israeli War, the Suez War, the Six Days War and the Yom Kippur War. In the 1950s, Israelis took advantage in a crisis from Egypt with France and the United Kingdom to invade the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula. The relationship between Israelis and Palestinians remained tense, which resulted in Palestinian resistance movements against the occupation by Israel. In 1964 was created the Organization for Palestinian Liberation, the PLO, which seek to fight for the lost rights of Palestinians in the region with the recent events. PLO members used armed struggle as a way to resist Israel, and one of their best-known names was Yasser Arafat, leader of the organization since 1969. The PLO's main political group is Fatah, a moderate group that still exists. In 1967, the Six-Day War started after Israel's attack on Syria. In just 6 days, Israelis took the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, Assyrian Golan Heights, East Jerusalem and the Cisjordania. Even with the subsequent UN resolution that Israel should return such territories, they remained under its control for a long time. In 2000 began the Second Intifada, led by Hamas. A Palestinian offensive was mounted against Israel, which again responded harshly, in addition to demolishing Palestinian homes and starting construction on the West Bank or Israel Wall in 2002. Thousands of deaths occurred on both sides of the war, which lasted until 2004, with the death of the Hamas leader. The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, as we can see, has been going on for decades and has as its central issue the domain of Palestine. However, in the last years, much criticism has been taking place of Israel for the way this situation has been conducted, especially for the disproportionate violence used against the Palestinian population. The State of Israel defends itself, arguing that your action takes place only as a way to guarantee the safety of its population and to combat terrorist actions, such as those attributed to Hamas, the organization that commands Palestine since 2006 and, as we have seen, is seen as terrorist by Israel. However, the disproportionate actions that many criticize are not just military, which, in its most, results in the death of innocents without any connection with groups like Fatah or Hamas. Many still point out that there is a segregationist regime in the region like the apartheid that existed in South Africa. The journalist Mohamed Omer point out the difficulties in the life of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. He claims that the Palestinians often have their supplies of gas, potable water and electric energy cut off. He also mentions the difficulty that the Palestinians in the region have to obtain food, in addition to the frequent bombings that victimize innocents and destroy schools and hospitals. Moreover, many criticize the fact that Israel, even today, don't allows the return of the descendants of refugees that abandoned the region after the war waged on 1948. Lastly, the Israeli settlements in Cisjordania and the expulsions of Palestinian inhabitants of their homes to the construction of these settlements have been the subject of recent criticism. What is perceived in this conflict is that its resolution is far from reaching, because, even with momentary peace agreements, just a little spark is enough to start the battles over again, raising again the number of dead people. In the same time, the creation of the Palestinian state has been difficult, because the territorial fights still are intense, although the state is internationally recognized by many countries. It's the name given to the operation that aims to bring light to the questions mentioned above, clearly and objectively. This operation is involved with many collectives from around the world, having already many years of operation. The focus of the operation is to minimally bring justice and visibility to the oppression suffered by the Palestinian people in relation to Israel. The goal is to expose information that reveals aggressive planning against Palestine and actions that are considered crimes against the humanity, besides taking systems down and affecting institutional sites.